What if the biggest complaint in motorcycling right now is based on a complete illusion? We've all heard it at bike nights and in comment sections. New bikes are too expensive. But when you compare the MSRP of actual showroom models from 4 years ago against their modern counterparts, most of them haven't even kept pace with the price of a gallon of milk. So why does riding feel so overwhelmingly expensive in 2026? We are putting 10 iconic motorcycles under the financial microscope to expose what actually changed and who is really taking your money. Breaking your bank. At number 10, the Kawasaki KLR650. The KLR650 is basically the industry's stubborn old uncle who refuses to change his ways. And honestly, good for him. The engine is a liquid-cooled single-cylinder unit displacing 652 cubic centimeters, and it has not been meaningfully touched since fuel injection arrived back in 2022. Between 2022 and 2026, Kawasaki basically changed the stickers and the colors and called it a day. $6,699 then, $6,899 now. A jump of $200 or roughly 3%. That tracks almost perfectly with standard inflation, which means the verdict here is unchanged value. Here is a number nobody talks about though. The KLR's dual sport rivals from Honda and Suzuki have seen their own MSRPs creep at nearly identical rates over the same window, which tells you this is not a Kawasaki-specific story. It is an entire segment quietly holding its price line while the internet insists otherwise. There is also a practical reason Kawasaki can get away with leaving this bike alone for so long. The KLR platform was designed with such a huge margin of mechanical simplicity built in that there is genuinely very little left to improve without inflating the price dramatically. Owners routinely report riding these things past the 80,000-mile mark on nothing but oil changes, valve checks, and basic fuel injection system maintenance. When a bike is already engineered to be nearly indestructible, a manufacturer has very little financial incentive to reinvent it, and that restraint is precisely what is keeping the price so flat. It also helps that the KLR competes in a category where buyers are not exactly demanding constant reinvention. Dual sport riders tend to be an older, more mechanically minded crowd who actively prefer a known quantity over a flashy redesign, and Kawasaki clearly understands that chasing trends here would alienate the exact people keeping this nameplate alive. You are not getting robbed buying a KLR today. You are also not getting spoiled. You are getting the exact same bulletproof single you could have bought 4 years ago for basically the exact same money, adjusted for the fact that eggs also cost more now. Imagine standing in front of a bike you want, the seller swearing it's perfect. That's where riders overpay by thousands on a $10,000 bike. Our buyer's kit tells you what it's really worth, your fair price, and when to walk away. A wrong bike costs thousands. This kit, just $49. The easiest money you'll ever save. Scan the QR on the right or tap the link in the description. Let's get that bike you've always wanted for even cheaper. But if a bike that didn't change barely moved in price, what happens when a bike gets a complete identity crisis instead? That is where things get interesting. Climbing into the number 9 spot, the Honda 𝗕𝗏. The Honda 𝗕𝗏, that tiny gremlin of a motorcycle that made an entire generation of riders fall in love with going 25 miles per hour and feeling like outlaws, cost $3,399 in 2022. In 2026, it costs $3,599. $200 more, just under 6%. While Honda introduced the revolutionary 5-speed gearbox and long-stroke engine overhaul back in 2022, this latest update spent its energy giving the 𝗕𝗏 a sharper, more angular set of body panels and a redesigned headlight cover instead of touching the already upgraded mechanicals. What makes this one worth dwelling on is just how culturally important this tiny bike has become. The 𝗕𝗏 essentially built an entire aftermarket ecosystem of exhausts, grip kits, and mini moto racing leagues around a bike that still costs less than most people's phone contracts over 2 years. It is also worth pointing out that Honda's decision to leave the drivetrain alone is not laziness, it is strategy. The 𝗕𝗏 occupies a very specific niche where its main competition is not other motorcycles at all. It is scooters. And in that fight, keeping the price as low as physically possible matters far more than chasing another 5 horsepower nobody actually needs on a bike this small. Dealers have also reported that the 𝗕𝗏 remains one of the most frequently financed bikes in the entire Honda lineup among first-time riders under the age of 25, which tells you Honda understands exactly who is buying this thing and is pricing accordingly. Verdict: unchanged value. A cosmetic refresh at an inflation-matching price. Riders love to point at bikes like this as proof the hobby got expensive, but the math just does not back that up. And speaking of things that actually matter for your wallet, if you are enjoying this breakdown so far, hit subscribe right now because we are about to get into the bikes where the story flips completely, and you do not want to miss the ones where the price actually jumped for a reason. Robbing you blind at number 8, the Kawasaki Ninja ZX6R. The Kawasaki Ninja ZX6R, comparing its 2021 base non-ABS model against its 2026 counterpart, went from $10,199 to $11,399. That is $1,200 more, or 11.8%, which is double digits, and double digits should make your eyebrow twitch a little. The engine is still a liquid-cooled inline-4 at 636 cubic centimeters, but here is the twist. Kawasaki gave it a sharper face, new color TFT dashboards, and updated riding modes, which sounds like an upgrade, except they also revised the cam profiles and slightly reduced top-end power to satisfy Euro 5 emissions rules. This is the segment where emissions regulation quietly becomes the villain instead of the manufacturer itself. Middleweight super sports across nearly every brand have absorbed similar detuning over the past several years, and buyers rarely connect that to the number on the price tag. There is a deeper irony buried in this one too. The middleweight super sport class as a whole has been shrinking across almost every manufacturer's lineup for the better part of a decade, with several once beloved 600cc class competitors quietly discontinued entirely rather than redesigned. That means the ZX6R is not just absorbing its own emissions costs, it is absorbing a larger share of Kawasaki's research and development budget for the entire category, because there are fewer siblings left to spread that cost across. Fewer bikes sharing the engineering bill means each surviving model has to shoulder more of it, and that shows up directly in the sticker price. So you are paying more money for a bike that technically makes less raw performance than its predecessor, on a platform with fewer competitors left to keep pricing honest. The verdict is worse value. This is the first crack in the everything is fine narrative, and it tells you something important. Sometimes the price goes up specifically because the rulebook made the engineers detune the fun out of it. Keep that in your back pocket because it comes up again. Rebranding its way into number 7, the Honda CB500X. The Honda CB500X of 2021 became the Honda NX500 by 2026, which already sounds like Honda, trying to trick you into thinking it is a new bike. Price then, $6,999. Price now, $7,399. A gap of $400, about 5.7%. The engine is a liquid-cooled parallel twin at 471 cubic centimeters, essentially carried over. But Honda did not just slap a new badge on it and walk away. While the CB500X already received Showa, inverted forks, and dual front discs back in 2022, the new NX500 dropped in significantly lighter cast alloy wheels, threw in selectable traction control, and upgraded the dash to a full 5-inch color TFT display. Compare that to the 𝗕𝗏 from number 9 for a second. Both bikes got cosmetic attention, but only one of them backed it up with genuine suspension, wheel, and electronics hardware across this span. That distinction is basically the entire point of this video in miniature. What is genuinely clever about this particular rebrand is the timing of it. Honda rolled the NX500 name change out at almost the exact moment the adventure touring category exploded in popularity among riders who wanted something lighter and cheaper than the big bore GS and Africa Twin machines. By repositioning the CB500X under a fresh nameplate right as demand spiked, Honda essentially got to introduce genuinely upgraded hardware while riding a wave of category-wide interest, which let the price increase land much softer than it would have in a flat market. That wheel, traction control, and TFT upgrade package alone is the kind of combined overhaul that on the aftermarket would run way over $400, meaning Honda essentially built the entire price increase directly into genuine functional hardware. That is a real equipment upgrade, not a paint job. The verdict is better value, and honestly, it might be one of the best deals on this entire list. A rebrand that actually earned its new name. But rebrands are one thing. What happens when a manufacturer does not just refresh a bike, but tears the entire platform down to the frame rails and starts over? Holding the line at number 6, the Yamaha YZF-R3. The Yamaha YZF-R3 sat at $5,299 in 2022 and now sits at $5,499 in 2026. $200, roughly 3.8%. The liquid-cooled inline twin at 321 cubic centimeters is identical, spec for spec, to what it was 4 years ago. Yamaha spent its budget on new colorways and basically nothing else. Worth noting here, the R3 remains one of the most financeable new bikes on the market, with monthly payments on most dealer plans, landing well under the cost of a basic gym membership, plus a streaming subscription combined. There is also a competitive chess match happening behind this number that most riders never see. The R3 sits in direct competition with Kawasaki's Ninja 400 and KTM's smaller Duke models. And none of those manufacturers want to be the first one to blink and raise prices meaningfully, because the small displacement sport bike buyer is famously price sensitive and will happily walk across the showroom floor to a competitor over a few $100s. That competitive pressure is basically acting as an invisible price ceiling on the entire category, and it is a big part of why bikes like the R3 have stayed so remarkably flat, while larger, less competitive segments have drifted upward. Yamaha also benefits here from a massive global production footprint for this exact platform, since the R3's underlying engine and chassis are shared across several markets worldwide, rather than being a North America-only product. Building at that kind of scale spreads tooling and factory costs across a much larger pool of units, which is a big part of why a fully liquid-cooled twin with modern fuel injection can still be sold for barely over $5,000 without Yamaha losing money on every unit. Verdict: unchanged value. It is proof that the small, entry-friendly end of the sport bike market is still holding the line on affordability, even while everybody online insists beginner bikes have priced themselves out of reach. They have not. They have just gotten a fresh coat of paint every couple of years while quietly staying affordable. But hold that thought, because the very next bike on this list did the opposite in almost every conceivable way. Earning its keep at number 5, the KTM 390 Duke. This is where things go from mild inflation to actual generational redesign, and it is the KTM 390 Duke. In 2021, it cost $5,390. In 2026, it costs $5,899. That is a difference of $509, or about 9.4%, which sounds steep until you see what you are actually buying. The liquid-cooled single-cylinder engine grew from 373 cubic centimeters to 399 cubic centimeters, but that is genuinely the smallest part of the story. KTM gave this bike an entirely new Generation 3 trellis chassis with completely different geometry, a bigger TFT dashboard, and upgraded electronic riding modes. It is also worth mentioning that this Generation 3 platform underpins several other models in KTM's lineup now, meaning the engineering cost got spread across an entire family of bikes, rather than sitting entirely on the shoulders of one small displacement naked. There is a manufacturing story here too that rarely gets told. KTM shifted a significant portion of this platform's production to a partnership facility overseas, specifically to help absorb the cost of the new chassis and electronics package without passing the full engineering bill directly onto the customer. Without that manufacturing shift, industry analysts have suggested the price increase on this generation could have easily landed closer to 15 or 20% instead of the modest 9.4% riders actually saw. In other words, KTM essentially ate a chunk of its own redesign costs internally, rather than dumping the entire bill onto buyers, which makes this price jump look even more reasonable in hindsight. This is not a sticker change. This is a ground-up overhaul wearing the same name. Verdict, better value, and it is not particularly close. A 9% price bump for a functionally new motorcycle is one of the best trades on this entire list. Now, if you have made it this far and you are starting to see the pattern here, that some of these price jumps are complete robbery and some of them are genuinely earned, do me a favor and drop a comment below telling me which one of these 10 shocked you the most, because I read every single one and I want to know if the KTM surprised you as much as it surprised us researching it. And because we are halfway through the biggest jumps still left on this list, the next 4 entries include the single biggest engineering leap of the entire video. Rebuilding itself at number 4, the BMW GS line. We land on the boxer twin royalty of the adventure world, the BMW GS line. And this comparison is basically a masterclass in what a real generational leap looks like. The 2021 BMW R1250 GS costs $17,995. By 2026, the renamed and re-engineered R1300 GS costs $18,895. That is $900 more, right around 5%, which on an $18,000 motorcycle is honestly kind of remarkable. The air and liquid-cooled horizontal boxer twin grew from 1,254 cubic centimeters to 1,300 cubic centimeters. But BMW did not stop there. They dropped substantial chassis weight while simultaneously gaining power, relocated the gearbox to a more compact position beneath the engine, and bolted on a full radar-guided safety system. That last piece deserves its own sentence. Radar-guided adaptive cruise control was, until very recently, a feature you would only find on luxury cars costing well into 6 figures. BMW put it on a motorcycle and only charged 5% more to do it. Consider also that the GS lineup has consistently been the best-selling, large displacement adventure bike on the planet for well over a decade. And that sales volume is doing a huge amount of quiet work behind the scenes. When a manufacturer sells this many units of a single platform globally, the fixed cost of developing something as expensive as a radar safety system gets divided across an enormous number of buyers, which is exactly why BMW could afford to include genuinely cutting-edge tech without the price ballooning the way it might on a lower volume niche model. Scale is doing just as much work here as engineering, and it is a big reason this comparison looks so generous. That is an entire engineering department going back to the drawing board, and they are only charging you 5% more for the privilege. Verdict, better value, and one of the most impressive numbers on this whole list. But even BMW's 5% pales in comparison to a certain sport-focused superbike that Suzuki quietly improved without anyone really noticing. Sneaking into number 3, the Suzuki GSX-R1000. We swing over to the GSX-R bloodline, and the Suzuki GSX-R1000 is proof that flagship superbikes are still playing fair with pricing mostly. In 2021, it retailed at $15,799. By 2026, the base model sits at $16,499, a gap of $700, about 4.4%. The liquid-cooled inline-4, displacing 999.8 cubic centimeters, got a revised engine block with a compression ratio of 13.2 to 1, an upgraded IMU-based electronic safety package, and refined chassis dynamics. For context, carbon aero winglets like these were basically exclusive to full factory racing programs less than a decade ago, and now they are bolted onto a bike a regular rider can walk into a dealership and finance on a Tuesday afternoon. There is a homologation angle worth mentioning here as well. Superbike racing regulations in several major series require manufacturers to sell a certain number of road-going units featuring the same aerodynamic components used on the track before those parts can even be legally raced. That requirement means Suzuki was essentially obligated to bring winglet technology to showroom floors if they wanted to remain competitive in production-based racing, which turns this price increase into less of a marketing decision and more of a regulatory necessity dressed up as a feature upgrade. Riders benefit from race-bred technology, trickling down to the street bike specifically because the rulebook forced the manufacturer's hand. That is track day hardware and MotoGP-inspired aerodynamics for a price increase smaller than what most of us pay in the annual insurance hikes. Verdict: better value. If you thought superbikes were the poster child for motorcycling getting too expensive, this one alone should make you reconsider. Cruising into number 2, the Suzuki Hayabusa. We arrive at the undisputed king of straight-line speed, the Suzuki Hayabusa. And honestly, this one might be the most satisfying comparison on the entire list. In 2022, the Hayabusa cost $18,599. In 2026, the standard model costs $19,399. That is $800, roughly 4.3% over 4 years, on a $19,000 hyperbike. The liquid-cooled inline-4 at 1,340 cc receives standard electronic improvements, including a smart cruise control system that now integrates seamlessly through the quick shifter's gear changes. Consider that the Hayabusa nameplate has existed for over a quarter of a century at this point, and Suzuki has resisted the urge to reinvent it every single generation just to justify a bigger number on the invoice. There is also a brand loyalty economic story hiding in this figure. The Hayabusa has one of the highest repeat ownership rates of any performance motorcycle on the market, with a large percentage of buyers being second or even third-time owners of the same nameplate across different generations. That kind of loyalty gives Suzuki very little incentive to gauge the price, because their most reliable revenue stream is not first-time impulse buyers, it is long-time fans who will simply walk away and buy something else entirely if the price stops making sense relative to what they remember paying last time. Keeping the price discipline is essentially Suzuki protecting its own most valuable customer base. There is one more angle worth noting on this particular bike. The Hayabusa nameplate also carries an unusually strong resale market compared to most sport bikes in its class, with used examples routinely holding a much larger percentage of their original value years down the line. A bike that retains value that puts subtle downward pressure on the new bike price too, since Suzuki cannot afford to price the new model so far above a thriving used market that buyers simply opt for a lightly used example instead. Suzuki barely touched the price of one of the most legendary motorcycles ever built, and they improved the real-world usability while doing it. Verdict: better value easily. If a hyperbike can hold its price line this tightly, the motorcycles got too expensive argument is looking weaker by the minute. Imagine walking into a viewing holding all the cards. You know the fair price, you know your opening offer, and you know the exact number where you walk away. That's how you knock hundreds, even thousands off the asking price. Our buyer's kit hands you those numbers for just $49. Negotiate from facts and never overpay again. Scan the QR on the right or tap the link in the description. Right away, knowing you got the best deal. Before we get to the #1 spot in the actual punchline of this entire video, if any of these prices genuinely surprised you, tap that like button right now, because it tells us you want more of these receipts only, no nonsense price breakdowns, instead of the usual doom and gloom takes you see everywhere else. Cracking the case. At #1, the Ninja ZX-6R reveals the real culprit. Remember the Kawasaki Ninja ZX-6R from #8? The one that jumped 11.8% while actually losing a bit of horsepower to emissions rules? That bike is our #1 because it is the clearest example of the actual thesis of this entire video. The sticker price on most motorcycles barely moved. The KLR moved 3%. The Grom moved under 6%. The R3 moved under 4%. The Hayabusa, a literal legend, moved barely over 4%. These are not the numbers of an industry gouging its customers. These are the numbers of an industry mostly keeping pace with inflation, occasionally innovating genuinely, like the KTM and the BMW and the Honda rebrand, and only occasionally getting caught red-handed, charging more for less like that Kawasaki Supersport. So if sticker prices barely moved, why does every rider on the internet swear motorcycling got unaffordable? Because the sticker was never the problem. Insurance premiums on sport bikes have climbed at a pace that makes an 11% motorcycle price bump look like a rounding error, with some sport bike-specific policies now costing more annually than the down payment on the bike itself. Tire prices have crept up year after year, and a sport touring bike eats through a rear tire a lot faster than your grandfather's cruiser ever did, especially with modern sticky compounds that trade longevity for grip. Dealer labor rates have climbed into territory that makes a simple valve check feel like a second mortgage, with some shops now billing well over $150 an hour for work that used to run half that. Financing got more expensive because interest rates got more expensive, full stop, and that hits a $19,000 𝗕𝗨𝗬𝗘𝗥𝗦 a lot harder than it hits the sticker price itself, sometimes adding thousands over the life of a loan that barely existed as a line item a decade ago. Protective gear, helmets, jackets, boots, all of it crept upward too, as materials and safety certification standards got stricter across the board. And maybe the biggest hidden cost of all, the genuinely cheap, bare-bones entry-level segment, the true beginner bikes that used to flood the market at rock-bottom prices, has been quietly shrinking, leaving riders comparing today's remaining lineup to a segment that barely exists anymore, which warps the entire perception of what affordable is even supposed to mean. There is one more piece of this puzzle worth sitting with before we close things out. Registration fees, state-mandated safety inspections, and emissions testing costs have also crept upward in a number of states over the past several years, and none of that shows up anywhere on a manufacturer's price sheet, yet it absolutely shows up in what a rider actually spends to get a bike legally on the road. Add to that the rising cost of secure storage, whether that means a garage, a cover, or a dedicated lock system, since motorcycle theft rates in several major metro areas have climbed noticeably, and you start to see just how many invisible line items are stacking up around a purchase that on paper barely moved in price at all. None of these costs live inside the MSRP, which is exactly why they are so easy to overlook and so easy to blame on the bike itself instead of everything surrounding it. And there is a final wrinkle worth mentioning because it ties this whole video together. Aftermarket accessory pricing, things like heated grips, luggage systems, aftermarket exhausts, and even basic phone mounts, has climbed at a rate that far outpaces anything we have seen on the bikes themselves throughout this entire list. Riders rarely buy a motorcycle in complete isolation. They build it out with gear and accessories over the following months, and that build-out cost has quietly become one of the largest hidden expenses in modern ownership, often rivaling the price gap between an entire generation of a motorcycle. The bike itself did not get expensive. Everything around the bike did. And that, riders, is the actual plot twist nobody wants to admit, because it is a lot more satisfying to blame a manufacturer than to blame your own insurance company. 10 motorcycles, 10 honest comparisons. Most of them held the line. A few of them genuinely got better. Only one of them quietly got worse while dressed up to look improved. The sticker price was never the villain in this story, so stop yelling at Kawasaki dealerships and start yelling at your insurance agent instead. Now go click on the next video on your screen and make sure you subscribe before you do, because we are about to break down exactly where all that hidden money is actually going.